How important is seeing a figure in person when making purchasing decisions? Because I, for the longest time, and I still do maintain this, you can do this. You can make a decision without seeing the figure in hand, because that's a very expensive experiment. That's like, if you could, like, if there's a controversial head sculpt and I'm kind of so on that figure anyway, I'm going to get that figure in hand, depending upon where I bought it from. If I didn't get it from Sideshow, it's harder to return to some places, right? Depending upon where you got it from. So I'm going to have to get that in hand, make a determination. People have tight budgets in this community. We're in an economic recession, as far as I'm aware. And you don't, a lot of times you don't have the luxury to do such things like that. You got to be at least pretty confident. More often than not, I'd be willing to bet that collectors get a figure in hand and they like it more in hand than they liked it in the blogger picks. Almost 95% of the time, that's the case. The reason I bring this up is because exactly what Kiko and I talked about when we were in Tennessee. I looked at a lot of Kiko's figures in hand and I was like, damn, I guess I fucked that one up. Because, like Cable, for example, I saw Cable and I was like, that's pretty good, actually. That looks pretty good. Same with Rosario. I didn't say I hated that figure, but I was like, I don't know. Maybe it's okay. It's a decent sculpt, not great, but it looks pretty good in person. So even Bo-Katan, I saw Bo-Katan and I saw that head sculpt and I was like, it's not bad. It's not a 10, but it's not bad. And even Shang-Chi, and I bought Shang-Chi anyway because I love the character, but Shang-Chi's blogger photos came out and I was like, yeah, the head sculpt's still pretty good, but it's definitely a downgrade. But we get it in hand, maybe a slight downgrade from the proto, not much. Like, it's pretty damn good. So that said, Ben, I want to ask you, how important is seeing a figure in hand, in person? How does this change your perception? Do you think you need to do this to make an accurate judgment on a figure?
I think it's really hard to do it. I think that's part of the challenge with collecting 1/6 scale is there's not enough brick and mortar stores that have these things on display that you can kind of just walk into and look at them and make your purchasing decision. So we have to make that judgment a lot of the time based on blogger photos and the perceptions of YouTubers like you guys that who've been collecting long enough to say, hey, yeah, I think this looks good, and then people are more willing to consider it versus maybe not. I think that's kind of almost the worst part of collecting 6 scale is that they're so expensive and they're so hard to make a true judgment as to whether we should buy them or not. It's why these streams are so popular. And it's why I watched the streams like long before I ever thought I'd be on them with you guys, because of that very reason. I'm in Canada. There's literally nowhere I could go to look at these. And I didn't know anybody. I didn't have any friends that had 6 scale collections. I was the only person I even knew that collected these. I never used to talk about it because it was like, I, what do you say? Like, how do you even describe it to somebody that doesn't collect? Right? So
Right.
to answer your question, I think it is important if you have the opportunity. And I think it's important to make your own decisions and not let YouTubers or influencers literally influence your judgment. There was a time where I would watch, it might sound mean, but it's not meant to at all. I would watch Justin's collection videos on mute just to see the what the figure looked like in hand, but not feel the FOMO of missing out. Like, I didn't want to necessarily hear what he thought of it. I just wanted to be able to see it and then kind of make my own decision, because I am the type of person that if you tell me I should buy this enough times, I'll actually start to consider it. A couple weeks ago, I talked myself out of Zod, General Zod, because I saw him for a really good deal. But I was like, I don't feel like I need it. I don't feel like I need it. I'm just buying it. I wanted to buy it because of the hype of the trailer of the new DC film, but I didn't buy it initially. I don't think I necessarily need it now. And when I said that like live on Collecting Weekly, I know the guys were giving me a hard time, but the chat like blew up. It was like, you're crazy, you missed out, you should go back and buy it and all these things. And I'm not kidding. Within the next 2 hours, I seriously had to think about whether I actually should or not.
Mm.
That's not necessarily a good thing. That is fear of missing out. That is like following the hype. That is not buying it because you feel like you need it or like it enough to have it. So, to answer the question, I bought my Loki recently, and the perception of that figure was that the head sculpt was not very good. That it was like a 7, maybe an 8, maybe an 8 out of 10 from most people that were seeing it or seeing blogger photos of it. And it went from being a figure that I felt like I desperately needed to have in the collection. I fucking, excuse my language, I absolutely love that Loki. I wanted it in my display. I waited. I finally pulled the trigger a few weeks ago, got it in hand, and absolutely love it. Like
Yep.
it completely changed my perception. I tried to take some high quality photos of it. It doesn't photograph the way I want it to. The way that I see it in person is astounding, even in comparison to my own photographs of the figure. It doesn't necessarily do it justice. This Bo-Katan behind me is the same way. I went into that store today. They actually did have this Bo-Katan on display. And I was like, I'm buying that. I'm literally buying that today. It looks amazing. It looks beautiful. And I love Katie Sackhoff as an actress. I've liked her ever since Battlestar Galactica days. So, like, for me, I'm like, to get a Katie in my collection, I think is pretty badass. But seeing it today is truly what sold me on it in the collection. So, I do think it is important, but I recognize the fact that it's not a luxury that we all have. And at the end of the day, I think you should go with your gut as to whether you actually feel like you want the figure or if it's just being hyped to death.
Yeah. And that's a good point. I mean, we got some really good comments in the chat, and I'm just going to highlight one of them real quick. Tremble, unless you have access to brick and mortar stores, like Ben was saying, to see the figs you really want, it's tough, right? We rely on promo picks, blogger picks, reviews, and streams discussing figures. Yeah, pretty much. Because, that's why it was so great going to Tennessee and going to places, even in Kentucky, like Replay Toys with Kiko. Because in Maryland, I'm with you, Ben. I don't really have that. There's one store that I could probably go to that is an hour and a half for me. Right? It's really far away, and they probably don't even have most of the stuff. They get Hot Toys a little bit later, right? So even if I wanted to go see things in hand, it's not like I would have access to do so. So these are mostly, they're imported products, right? So you have to mostly make judgments based on online videos and photos. So it's tough. A lot of times the figures look better in person, but we don't have that luxury most of the time. So it's interesting. But Kiko, sometimes you do, because you get to go to Replay Toys and other great places, but you also buy first batch. So how do you grapple with this type of concern here?
Definitely the wrong person to ask here, because I don't think I'm the best person for this. But
Yeah.
there's no doubt that seeing something real gives you the official answer one way or the other, because you can see it, you hold it. But there's a catch-22 for that. Depending on if you're going into someone's house and seeing it as opposed to seeing it in a store. If you see it in someone's house, yeah, you can make a definitive judgment, no worry whatsoever. You go to the store, you're now in the store in a position to buy something if you like it. So you can be like, okay, I like this. It's coming home with me. So that's a little bit dangerous as well. It's very interesting, because I'm the kind of guy that I take a chance, essentially, and I want to make that call myself when I have it. With these figures, I think maybe 98% of all the ones I've gotten, I have never held it in my hand and said, I'm disappointed I've gotten this. There's been like one or two, but a majority of them, once you have it in hand, you know that it was worthwhile. So I don't know necessarily if you need to see it to confirm that you either missed or missed out. But when you do, you can make that decision in hindsight to go back and get something. Oh, look, there's Batman Begins or Batman
There
Beyond.
he is.
And this is one of those figures, is that I used to have this and I sold it. And then it became available again because I remembered how good it was in hand. And I was like, okay, I'm going back to get it. And that's what happened there. But I don't necessarily think, and I loved what Ben said, is that I don't think you need to let people tell you that you need it. You need to make that decision yourself. And I don't think there's anything wrong with saying, okay, I do just want to look at blogger photos. I don't want to necessarily look at a review. If I am, I think it's a great idea. Like no shade to anybody, but maybe just watch the segment of them showing the figure off, not telling you what they think, because we are very, very influenced, especially, on YouTube and such. And I think we do need to be very, very careful to make sure that it's something I want. And when you hold it in your hand, you can say, I'm glad I had that. That's why I told you, Will, I was like, hey, put this Mark V suit up in your hand. Let me know what you think. And you held it and you're like, this is too much for me. I'm stressed out. I don't want it.
I didn't want to break it. That's why.
Yeah. You're like, I don't want this. And you put it back and you put it back. But then you put a Coal Obsidian in your hand. And you're like, okay, this is cool. I like this. I think it's 50-50. You don't need it, but it helps. And I think when you can see and hold it in your hand and you're like, wow, this is really cool. This is better quality than I thought it was going to be. Because there are some you pick up, you're like, wow, this is not what I thought it was going to be. And you can decide against it. It goes both ways. So I don't listen to me, because my judgment is skewed and I make a lot of impulsive decisions. I think Ben's recommendations are by far the best. So I will see with what he says. But yeah, holding it in hand will definitely give you the definitive answer But if you're in store, it could lead to a purchase. So always watch it at somebody's house instead of going to a store to see it.
You know, Kiko, this is literally an example. I mean,
yes,
you know,
that is the one.
This is literally an example, a real world example, because you know how much I talked about how much I hated the joints. Remember, I was like, I love Scorpion and Sub-Zero. They are tier 1 characters for me. I love Mortal Kombat. I grew up playing a lot of Mortal Kombat. I love those 2 characters, but those joints bugged the shit out of me, and I like realism. But then, Kiko, we were in the Replay Toys, right?
Yep.
You remember this. We were in Replay Toys, and I saw those 2 figures, and I was like, those are pretty cool. And I was like, but I don't want to take them out of the box. He was like, we're taking them out of the box. I'm going to go talk to the owner.
Hey,
Kiko's like,
go ahead.
Yeah, let's talk to the owner. Let's take him out of the box. So I took Scorpion out of the box, started posing a little bit. Kiko helped me move the armband up above the shoulder. At that point, I was sold. I was like, you know what? I was wrong. This figure's dope. All you got to do is work a little bit and cover those joints, and you can make it beautiful. So again, there's so many figures. This Tennessee trip was very eye-opening for me in that respect, because I was able to see so many great figures that I thought were shitty figures before I saw them in person. Even the Call Obsidian you mentioned, Kiko. So for those out there who know, I'm a big fan of the Black Order. That Infamous Toys Call Obsidian Dark Star, I think they call him, it's actually pretty good in person. Like, I saw it in person and I was like, damn, that actually has some presence to it. Yeah, there's some issues. The head doesn't always peg on perfectly, and maybe the pants are a little bit tight, but it has some presence. It has some presence to that figure. Yeah, it's not perfectly engineered, but it's good. So I might pick that one up eventually, Kiko. So again, and Rosario, you know, this Rosario is beautiful. So that's it.
And Rosario didn't like my photos, so I mean that's pretty good if you ask me.
That's it. That's pretty good.
I like
bro.
them.